So I'm Wendelien van Oldenborgh. I'm an artist from the Netherlands, but I'm currently based in Berlin. And maybe the best thing to say is that since the early 2000s, I started to think about the cinema or like the film language as a way to produce work. And I particularly say language because I think it's more the language of cinema and the ideas of production of film than actually following some kind of way of filmmaking that would be more common or more conventional. And I found this way very interesting because for me, cinema has a very interesting complexity where there are many layers and many tracks in which you can do things. So there is image, sound, and text, and there is these things work also on your. So you have a possibility to bring affect and information and analysis and other things that work in different ways. So I find it a very interesting, complex medium to explore. So I've been doing that since, let's say, 2005, 4, 5, more or less, more intensely. And in that period, actually, I moved back to the Netherlands since I had been living elsewhere for a long, long time. And I started to then also really pay attention to what were the dilemmas in the society at the time, and how I could somehow, with paying attention to different elements than what was being done, bring some air in that discussion. And I did this mainly also to pay attention to our colonial history that wasn't really at the time being looked at as part of how we see things now and how we have struggles with current society. So I think that's how it started. So with this solo exhibition, I'm super excited to be able to show really a bundle of works to a new audience, and in Asia especially, it interests me a lot. I've been working in the last also 20 years, more or less, on our Dutch relationship with Indonesia. So a colonial relationship, that is, of course. So it is interesting for me to come more towards the region and look at that in a different way and bring it here as part of the work. And I think that so what we decided to show in this solo exhibition is a few works from that period that will indicate this relationship and my particular view on that. And then we chose some more current works, more actual works that I made in the last 2 years, which have still got this interest. It's always about power relations, but then it's also, I wanted to start looking at what is, how young people actually are also present in all their diversity and bringing voice to society in their own way, which is not always, so there is a lot of activism, which I actually really appreciate, but there is also other ways in which these voices come to the public or in public sphere, which means that anybody who does anything in public is actually part of that. So these last works are particularly paying attention to maybe people that have a cultural expression and bring this, especially women, I was looking at, just because they are just less seen and less represented in this sphere. And I think it's nice to just pay attention to it. So these works are brought together. There are 5 works. And then I'm making a new work here in Tokyo, which is extremely exciting since I haven't had the chance to spend so much time. And so I had to do a lot of preparation from afar, and then coming here for quite a substantial amount of time. I'm here for 3 months. But still, it's a very, very condensed time to actually try and understand a few things of what's going on and who can, because the way that I work is really to not listen to my own voice, but listen to other voices. And so you have to first find out who you want to listen to and who you want to involve in having a conversation, which in my opinion should always be like a a rather large scope. So it's intergenerational. It's hopefully also a little bit like, yeah, diverse in different backgrounds, basically. So I wanted to bring these people together. So first I have to get to know a lot of people and find locations. That was really exciting. And it's well on the way now. So yeah, I was interested to see how in Japan feminist voices came to the public or came to the fore, and found out quickly that what was interesting is that most of these voices were writers, were actually authors who in the beginning of 20th century started to publish magazines like Seito in the early 10s or in the 10s, and then Nyunun Geutsu in the 20s, 30s. Both very interesting art-related feminist magazines with a lot of emphasis on politics. And then slowly, all the feminist voices had their own color and their own trajectory, and I kind of started to get interested in some that were, coming out for me. And one was an author who was actually a very popular author in her time as well, Hayashi Fumiko. And she was part of Ningetsu. She serialized her first novel through that magazine, but then when she launched the novel, it immediately sold so many copies that she sprang to fame quite immediately. Quite interesting, because she is somebody who comes from extreme poverty and very, like, really complex background. She's not even registered by her father, and so she has this kind of slightly outside, I think, position in society. And her voice really expresses her, in a way. What I like is I think maybe because of this slightly outside position, her voice is not conventional in terms of like how she expresses her femininity. So she's very raw and like open about her feelings towards men, or her own feelings towards her own desires and sexuality and her body and her poverty and and she works in horrible jobs, and so there's anger, but it's really punky, very raw, very, very beautiful also. So she is one of the two that I found very interesting. The other one that came to my attention was Miyamoto Yuriko, who is a very different character, but also very, very interesting in her voice, her woman voice. She is somebody from a much more privileged background, who had a good education, and then became very political. She then, from that position, became very loyal and very in solidarity with poverty. So she comes from like the top, and Hayashi comes from the bottom, so to say. But then she becomes very attuned with the socialist thought of the time, and because of that, she stayed very true to that. She's very, very strong politically, and because of that, actually, she was imprisoned during the war several times, which also led to her early death in 1951, which is the year that also Hayashi dies. And so this was kind of a weird coincidence that they both have the same lifespan. They both born around the turn of the century and then die in 51. So they were maybe late 40s, beginning 50s of age. So I found these two characters really interesting to somehow relate to each other. Then they both had also other aspects, like Hayashi, actually, in the wartime, she was commissioned to go on travel in the occupied territories of Japan. So in what's then the colonies, no, of the greater empire of Japan at the time. And in amongst these travels, she was quite a while in Indonesia. So this really interested me. It was in the time that, yeah, the Netherlands were defeated there, and there was Japan, and she was there. What was she writing? So that was really interesting to me to have a look at this history. Also, as a it's a kind of a contrast to Mimoto's history of the war. So we look at that as well. And then somehow Miyamoto has this interesting personal life where she, for 7 years, lives with a woman. And we also found writings that have been published quite recently. That is the private writings of her and her, at that time, companion, Yuasa Yoshiko, who was a translator of Russian literature. And they write to each other about their struggles of loving each other and how and what love means. And these are amazing, amazing writings that are letters, diary entries that we also somehow can access these days. So what interested me was that these two women, maybe they could be in some form of conversation with each other through these writings, actually. Of course, they are no longer here. But also, how could we bring these voices in resonance with voices of today, people who are today having thoughts about their position in the society, maybe their female voice, maybe their not female voice, but how, what are the struggles here? What are the questions that people have, and where is life really difficult? Where does the society pose impossible dilemmas on us? I mean, these are anyway my questions, like how do we resist that? How do we, what forms do we find to get out of that? So that's exactly what happened. So we read these texts together, and they did actually resonate a lot, I think, with the people today. So we have a group of it's a very varied group of people who joined in the filming. They're intergenerational, they are from different backgrounds, different professions. And yeah, I think the conversations that took place were really fruitful and very, very rich, very, very rich.